Welcome to the Life Mindset Mentorcast. This is the show that gives you practical spiritual tools that you need every week to very practically dominate stress, anxiety, fear, and depression. We will give you the basic components of a powerful mindset. We make it as easy as ABC for more life, more peace, and more power. I am your host, Lady Katsura, and co hosting with me is the amazing.
Zenith Fuego, the Christ Hematologist, coming to you live from the Trinidad Republic of Trinidad and Tobago.
Indeed. In today's episode, we will be discussing, are you committed to your goals like Jesus was? In this week's show, you will learn why you are just as competent as Jesus was to succeed in everything that you do. Now, I know 2020 has been one heck of a year, which makes it even more inviting to make 2021 more appealing. Wouldn't you agree, Zane?
Yes, I would indeed.
So, for many people, that might mean making a New Year's resolution, as we are probably familiar with, and for some people, that helps them get a start, like a fresh start to the new year. But the thing is that the tradition is usually forgotten by the time we embrace about, let's say, the second month into the year. So, this is why we decided to tackle the topic of goal commitment and how to approach it in self existence. So, to begin today's episode, we are going to start by defining what a goal is. I took the liberty of using a definition from Merriam Webster's dictionary. I'm going with a very simple one, something that you are trying to do or trying to achieve. So, now that we have the definition set, I'm actually going to throw a question out to you, Zane, to start the podcast rolling. What is the most trying moment that you have experienced, and what was your secret to your success?
What was the most trying moment for me in my this is in my life you're talking about?
Yeah.
Alright, so the most trying moment for me in my life would have to be coming to an identity crisis.
Okay.
Approaching or coming to the point of actually hitting a wall, or rather, to be honest, it felt like that I had come to hitting nothing. There was no wall
Mm-hmm.
when I actually came to that point of experiencing this identity crisis. I had grown up all of my life. This is just to give some context. I've grown up all of my life um in a re- let's say a religious atmosphere, religious environment, or if it wasn't, it was highly influenced by by the religious perspective, and specifically the Pentecostal perspective. And so, despite all of the things that I did through that period of my life, it was things that I actually learned and went out. I pretty much envisioned who I wanted to be, and I began to build on that. The
Mm-hmm.
problem that I faced was that the foundation upon which it was all standing, which was pretty much which pretty much came from my belief system, my
Uh-huh.
personal belief system concerning God and how things work, how the cosmos works with regards to one's interaction with God and so on. All of these things were found to be untrue. And an experience that actually caused me to actually pretty much face the reality and the truth that what I thought I knew was untrue, and that
Mm-hmm.
pushed me into a spiral into an identity crisis. Because if the foundation of your belief system and what you think you are is found to not be true, then the person that you have thought yourself to be, which is based on that foundation, is now also untrue.
Yeah.
And so that put me for about a good year in particular, a year or more, about a year, almost 2 years. I was in that identity crisis. The first year was the most difficult.
Right. So when you say you're in identity crisis, can you just elaborate a bit as to what that felt like?
Um, Well, it literally felt like number one, no, I can't really articulate into words, so the most I can do
Mm-hmm.
is probably put it into bullets, into bulleted points, so that you have an idea. Because of many things that were taking place. The first one was the question of who I am
Okay.
and what I am, right? Not having an answer to that made me feel as though I had nothing to hold on to. I was in the middle of the ocean and not a branch around to hold on to be able to pull myself out of what felt like a psychological drowning. And obviously, that actually caused a form of stagnancy. But one of the things that most people don't know is that you cannot, or rather, the mechanism of mobilization of any mind or spirit, and I'm using those two words here interchangeably, of mobilizing mechanism, or the mechanism for mobilization is that there must be a logic present, and that logic in particular is what helps the mind, or the spirit move from one thing to the next, or know how to move forward, right? If there is no logic, then the spirit remains stagnant. It's the same thing as somebody not learning how to walk. They literally stay in the same spot and not move, because
Mm-hmm.
they do not have they have not learned the logic of walking.
Right.
Right? So that was the position. It's pretty much psychologically. There was I was paralyzed. I was mentally paralyzed.
Yeah.
That caused me to feel a sense of anxiety. It also caused me to feel stressed, because those that are around me were not aware as to what was taking place, and so they held me responsible to their own logic, and their own logic is pretty much based on their identity, or what their identity is based on, and that didn't actually educate my logic. It was just
Right.
watching them and knowing that I don't want to be like them,
Mm-hmm.
and so that put me into a place where I had to go and search to find out what is real, what is true, and how do I find out what is true to be able to rebuild what I had spent 30 years living from.
Right. There's a definition here from Oxford Languages. Please feel free to tell me if this actually relates to what you are identifying with. Identity crisis, they relate to a period of uncertainty and confusion in which a person's sense of identity becomes insecure, typically due to a change in their expected aims or role in society.
Um, well, yeah, yeah, I can relate to that. The confusion definitely is there.
Mm-hmm.
The confusion definitely was there. What came into question big time on a massive scale was what was the role that I was supposed to be playing, because a lack of knowledge of what role I was supposed to be playing socially as well as existentially, not knowing that pretty much makes one feel and made me feel as though I was non existent. And
Right.
being non existent means that if I had died at that point in time, it felt like nothing would actually know that I was here.
Mm-hmm.
And neither was I able to enjoy life.
Yeah.
There is no enjoyment in an identity crisis, because you need a logic to know what enjoyment is.
Yes, definitely. So
So, so personal identity came into context, and of course that affected my profession. Right, I had spent about good 10 to 15 years building myself professionally, which is not something I'm going to, but it actually caused me to feel like I could not deliver in that profession momentarily.
Mm-hmm.
I could actually exercise the science of it, but the strength to be able to function in that and to function in that without question and confidence, that was gone.
Right.
Relationship in particular was something that came into question also. Relationship with people, relationship with family, relationship with a romantic relationship, all of those things came into question. How I function with God, what was God's expectations as a believer in Christ Jesus. You know, studying script, you're studying the Bible, you've been taught the Bible. What was my purpose? Purpose
Mm-hmm.
comes into question when identity is is questioned and threatened. Even the whole idea of how or what do I do to live? Like how do I move forward from here? That was gone. Inspiration is gone because to have inspiration, you need a logic to have inspiration.
Right.
So everything was actually the identity. The identity is what tied what your logic was based on. And so if identity is gone, the logic is gone, and so you pretty much. I found myself in a position of feeling like I was born here again and I didn't know what to do.
Right. Totally gotcha. So, I mean, you have. Thank you so much for sharing what your struggles were at that point in time. Now we're coming to the second half of the question: is what actually can you say contributed to your success? If you could share with us briefly, because well, you're no longer in that state, obviously.
Right.
So, what would you say was your secret to your success?
Well, my secret to my success really came through the very first thing that I did when I came to that identity crisis. And when I came to that identity crisis, I even questioned God and questioned Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
questioned my entire Christian life. And I was about really to actually let go of Christianity and let go of God. When I say Christianity, I'm speaking about the westernized perspective of Christianity here, right? And let go the whole idea of God because it was proven to be fruitless, and I had
Right.
no. It was not helping me. It was pretty much. If it is one thing that came to realization is that well, at that time I wasn't able to articulate the way that I can at this moment. But there's one thing I came to realization was that the westernized Christianity was powerless. It was incompetent. It taught me. It taught me for 15. Well, I grew up in that, so let's say 30 to 32 years. It taught me what not to do. But when it comes to identity, it did not tell me what to do.
Right.
It was totally incompetent. And
Mm-hmm.
so I came to that point, and the very first thing that I did, very first decision I made was to make to make a or to discern what is opinion from what is fact. That was my first step.
Okay.
Right? I needed to define what was opinion, strictly opinion, and an opinion is not necessarily a fact. An opinion can just be an opinion can be a thought that someone has formulated based on their logic, and their logic doesn't necessarily have to be from an identity that is true.
Yeah.
It could be just a formulation of their own mind. And so the first thing I needed to do was identify that, and so I made a separation. I made a separation between what is opinion and what is fact, and what is truth. Truth from opinion, opinion and truth. And so by logical deduction, I decided that I needed to identify what was true, and I needed a tangible reference point to be able to identify or to define what is true.
Mm-hmm.
So before I actually gave up the Christianity, since that was the thing that I knew all of my life through Pentecost, through the Pentecostal lens, the first thing I did was actually take it. Before I abandoned it, I decided to subject it and its entire framework, its entire logic, to a very empirical testing, empirical research. So I pretty much formulated experiments to test it according to what we were taught.
Right.
That was my
So,
first step.
so would you say then that that first step right there was the basically, in a nutshell, the success
No,
of
no, no, no.
that is a contributor?
That's just the first step towards that direction. What now pretty much brought me to success, a culmination of just a few factors. Number one, once we find the truth, the next step was to discipline the mind according to that truth.
Mm-hmm.
The third step after um, after disciplining the mind, and I say we identify the truth, we need to identify the truth of what one is, which I pretty much found from the Bible, to identify what one is and what one is through the correct lens. And once I found that, I began to discipline my mind. I came up with frameworks, actual framework that help me put the truth into practical living on a daily basis. So if you're asking me what brought success, would
Yeah.
be a decision to identify what is true from what is opinionated from what is actually practically and tangibly true. And once the truth is identified, formulating a framework to express that truth on a daily basis, and do that and doing that disciplinedly. With discipline, without discipline, your your mind, which is pretty much thought, a thought generator, it cannot function unless it actually has one particular truth that it can actually put into expression, or put into motion by logic based on that truth.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us that experience and your pointers that led to the success of basically getting out of that identity crisis that you were facing.
There, there,
This,
there's one thing that I want to add to that though,
mhm,
because this discipline to what is true and what is real is important to create or recreate a lifestyle, or recreate it. But in addition to that, once you identify what is truth and a framework is created to express that truth, and you see the tangibility of that truth, then comes inspiration to be able to know, the inspiration to actually live and to do or to perform or to create, to exercise or to fulfill purpose based on that truth.
awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I hope everyone was taking notes. So, this brings us to the end of our first half of our podcast. We are going to pause for a short break. And when we return, we are going to share how does our self-existent union with God, what does that have to do with success? As Zane was identifying, he was attributing a lot. He was actually sharing pointers to us with us, which has a lot to do with our with self-existence. So we're gonna go on a break, and when we return, we're gonna talk more about that. You are listening to the Life Mindset Mentorcast, the podcast that gives you the tools that you need every week to very practically dominate stress, anxiety, fear, and depression. Verified by pragmatic and experimental research of the Zinke Kitsura International Institute of Pneumatology. We give you the basic components of a powerful mindset. We make it as easy as A, B, C. You can also find content by Zane and Kitsuro through www.internationalinstituteofnumisology.com. To access weekly episodes of this podcast, other resources, and mentorship, become a Silver Star member at www.patreon.com/scene underscore ale underscore fuego. More life, more peace, more power. So welcome to the second half of our episode. In the first half, Zane shared with us what his situation was. I asked him what was one of the most challenging or trying situations that he's ever been in, and what was his experience like, and what was his secret to success. In the second half of the episode, what we're going to share with you all is we're going to have a brief look at our self-existent union with Father, and look at how we can apply it practically to achieve our goals as Christ. Now, Zane, you were sharing in the first half of the episode that that discipline, as a matter of fact, is very crucial. A lot of times, people may set goals even around identity crisis, like you experienced, and they may give up too soon when they face difficulties, setbacks, or challenges. Because
Yeah.
I'm sure your experience in itself was not an easy one. You talk about having to deal with other people's logic and their opinions and putting that down. And a lot of people, when they reach that bridge, instead of trying to find ways to improve to get the desired results, they end up letting go of their dreams, their goals, and in some cases, trying to bury their situation. So it's actually going to be, as we identified, it's not going to be something where it's not easy. And as you're identifying, discipline is necessary.
Well,
And
this is not that I'm actually saying that it is super simple here.
mhm,
But what makes it not easy for most people is that they do not tangibly express what their decision is.
okay,
I would say it is very easy, right? And
okay,
that might be baffling for most people, but it is super easy. The reason why it's challenging for most people is simply because they do not express their decision by a change of routine or by a change of their daily framework, their daily life framework.
okay. So as we're on this topic, can you share with us, with the few minutes that we have remaining before we wrap up, as
Mhm.
you are sharing that, what does it practically look like? Because we have 2020 is nearly ending, 2021 is right around the corner, and people may have similar experiences to you. What would you recommend to them in the self existent lens? How can they set their hearts on something and achieve it just like you did?
Is first of all, not everybody needs to go through the struggle or the challenge that I went through.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually moved from one identity to another and have become functional in the new identity and operational in it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we attribute what I have learned through that process to everybody, then simply this. So this is how I did it for me, and then I relate that to everybody else. So when I realized that my identity was a lie, it was not true. Then, as I mentioned, the next step was to identify what was opinions from what is actual tangible truth.
Okay.
And so what I did was simply do one thing that most people don't do. That's why it ends up being a challenge to keep up. Whatever you're actually looking to implement must become a priority, and life must be centered. Life must be or managed around that as the new priority.
Okay.
So what I did, for example, for me to really understand truth, I came up with this is from the religious lens to where I am now. walking in a self-existent in the function of God.
Mm-hmm.
What I had to do was to prioritize it. So what I did was I created a new framework. A new framework was I put great priority and emphasis on research. And the first thing, as I mentioned, was testing the Pentecostal perspective. So I put the Pentecostal perspective under the lens of research as well as experiments for basically 10 hours a day.
Wow.
So life did not continue as normal. That became a new priority, and I needed answers on that immediately, as quick as I can. Then I actually focused on that, and everything was centered around that.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was planned around that, around those 10 hours. In the same way, if you actually taking on a new resolution, most people take on a resolution which is simply a new decision. Most
Mm-hmm.
people take on a decision, and they take on decision by repeating, I will do this year, I will do this year, I will do this year. But
Yeah.
without adjusting in any form or fashion the life paradigm or the life framework to give that priority, so that you can practically live it out. You can practically bring it into manifestation. Now, a simple thing like that, a simple thing is, for example, most persons would say, for this new year, I want a six pack.
Mm-hmm.
I want to look fit. So I want to have a nice physique. I want my legs to look muscular, and I want to actually have a nice butt and all that kind of thing. And they would start, and they will start the year and not adjust anything on on the life framework. So what I am suggesting here in particular is that if you actually have anything, so let's use fitness as an example, then you need to sit down, grab a pen and paper, and come up with a daily schedule that makes fitness a priority, and actually plan your life around that fitness. That is actually the center. That is the mission. That is the goal, and that is what we're going at hard. Then your daily schedule should actually be planned around the time frame that you set for exercise and for training,
Yeah.
so that you do not leave it to memory when you remember, but your lifestyle means that you get up every morning and you engage a routine on a daily basis until it is accomplished. Framework is everything, and discipline to that framework. The factor that most people, 99.9% of people, miss is not creating a new framework to reflect the new decision. In other words, their new goal is imaginary. It is
Mm-hmm.
not it is not real until it is expressed in a framework or a plan of action.
Wow. That is an epic end to that. The music even went with it.
Hmm.
So, I basically what you have shared there, I'm sure it has been a lot. It has been very helpful for me. I'm sure our listeners, it has already impacted them, and I hope that it inspires those who are listening to take what you have shared with us and to put it into frameworks with their New Year's resolutions or their upcoming goals. Or it's not limited to New Year's resolutions, but whatever it is that you set your heart on, this is the same logic that Jesus worked from, even when he was a man. He didn't just allow things to just happen. When it happened, it happened. But he strategically put things in place to fulfill what was on his heart.
I mean, if I think next episode or the episode coming up next week, we can actually open that up for our listeners to really hear how Jesus did it
That sounds awesome.
in the same way.
In the same way, yeah, that sounds really good. All right. So, well, this brings us to the end of our episode for today. Saying anything you would like to leave with our listeners before we go?
Just one thing, or whatever your New Year's resolution is, I would encourage you to stop refrain it as a resolution, and start making it the New Year framework. No New Year resolution. What is your New Year framework?
New Year's framework. I love that. I love it. All right. Thank you so much for sharing. So, this is the Life Mindset Mentorcast, the show that gives you practical spiritual tools that you need every week to very practically dominate stress, anxiety, fear, and depression. We will give you the basic components of a powerful mindset. We make it as easy as ABC for more life, more peace, and more power. I'm your host, Lady Katsura, and my amazing co host.
En el fuego de Christ pneumatologist.
Do have a blessed upcoming year.